Welcome to the Ricky Mathews Show from the STMM Digital Studio right here on Biloxi's Back Bay. I want to welcome you to the show that celebrates the people who are working so hard to make Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play. Hey, listen, the hurricane season has been kind of quiet. It's been quiet, which you would expect with an El Nino year. And even though they said that we should expect a lot of storms still because of the heat content in the water. We've seen some of that. We saw Hurricane Idalia go into the Big Bend area of Florida. But here we've been mostly lucky. Let's hope that continues. But I thought it'd be a good time to invite my friend Josh Morgerman, who has a reality TV show on Weather Spy. He's a correspondent for Weather Nation. He's building Hurricane House in Bay St. Louis, even though his base station is in LA. And he is the top hurricane chaser in the world. He went to chase Idalia, for example. We'll talk about that here in just a minute. So without any further ado, let me welcome my friend Josh Morgerman back to the show. How you doing, my friend?
Awesome, Ricky. Thanks for having me back. I always like coming back on the Ricky Mathews Show.
Hey, listen. I had the opportunity to go to Panacea, and I know that you actually, and you can talk about this in just a second. But the way you go figure out where you're going to be, you do a lot of kind of pre-driving around, and you figure out about where the storm might hit, so you know the lay of the land, et cetera. We'll talk about that in a second. But I was in Panacea, and man, I was surprised. Where I stayed was about between 40 and 50 miles from west of where the storm went in. Okay. And I went on a run while I was there, about a 4.5 mile run, and I saw some down limbs here and there, and some a lot of pine needles on the ground and whatever. But man, I was amazed at how they got off the hook. I mean, to be that close to that eye, they got off the hook. The fact is that storm kind of started to fall apart in a big way, and that really helped what could have otherwise been a pretty significant hit. But what was your read on it, having been over there?
Yeah, it was really interesting the way it just kind of fell apart, the hurricane at the last second. These Gulf Coast hurricanes, it's really interesting. There were years and years where every hurricane that was moving north into the U.S. Gulf Coast, every single one of them would weaken and unravel as it came in. Katrina, being an example, didn't unravel enough, obviously, because it caused the highest storm surge ever recorded in the Western Hemisphere in Mississippi. But wind-wise, it really kind of fell apart as it came in. Rita, I mean, all those hurricanes from the mid-2000s. And folks got it in their heads that hurricanes moving into the U.S. Gulf Coast always weaken. And then in the last few years, we've had the opposite. We've had a bunch of them just totally bomb out and turn into monsters right before they come in. And it looked like Idalia was going to kind of continue that more recent trend. And Idalia sort of was almost like a step back to what we were having 20 years ago, where it just kind of fell apart as it came in. It was very interesting. You could see it on radar. It had this tight little core, looked really scary. And then in those final hours, it just kind of turned to scrambled eggs. It was still impactful when it came in, but it was kind of a mess of a storm.
Yeah, my friend who has a restaurant on the water in Panacea, and then he owns a couple of townhomes nearby there. And I was worried for him because if this thing had stayed together, and in this case the northeast quadrant of the storm as it approached approached the shore, it could have had very substantial storm surge. And the reality was it had storm surge. They all do. But, the slosh models on the storm surge for Idalia, in most cases, didn't bear out. I mean, it's certainly high storm surge. And for that one little sliver of coastline, thank God, for the most part, that part of the coastline, incidentally, is not well populated. It did create some big time challenges, but it could have been devastating. It could have, again, here we are talking about Tampa again. You saw concerns a couple of years in a row that Tampa could be the moment for Tampa, and it didn't turn out that way again. People say the Tampa Shield worked once again.
Yeah, the Tampa thing is really weird. Tampa's a great example of just the kind of irregularity of hurricane patterns. Of all the major cities and towns along the entire U.S. Gulf Coast, from Texas all the way to Florida Keys, Tampa has gone the longest without a direct hit from a major hurricane. Last time it happened was, I think, October 30th, 1921. So it's been over a century. And, it's going to happen at some point. And the shape of that bay and everything is just an invitation to a disaster, because if a hurricane comes in at just the right angle, that bay is just like a funnel that would cause, just sort of like St. Louis Bay, actually, here, in Mississippi, where it could really augment a storm surge, and it's a very densely populated area, so it is a disaster waiting to happen, and it's going to happen at some point, and one thing I want to say is, there's no shield there. Pensacola had gone really, really, really long without a hurricane, and then starting in the mid 90s, they just started getting nailed again and again. Look at Louisiana. Went a long time without any major hurricanes, and then 2020 to 2021, a bunch of really intense hurricanes just kept wailing on Louisiana. So that's kind of how hurricanes are. They kind of like, they leave a place alone, and then they just decide to like pick on it, and not let up.
Well, one of the things that's working for us this year is, again, it's an El Nino year, and what you would normally see is a lot of hostile environments, particularly in the upper atmosphere when it deals to the main development region. So what we would probably expect to happen, if there's going to be any storms that are going to hit like the northern Gulf now from this point forward, would be more homegrown systems, maybe a seed that of some sort gets into the Gulf, and then something develops from that. But we've been lucky, actually. I mean, we watched Hurricane Lee, it seemed like forever, as it headed toward Canada, and just around for such a long time. We've been lucky in that the Bermuda High set up in a certain way that allowed all those storms, as you talk about, to become fish storms, and for the most part, I mean, obviously there are peripheral impacts to the United States, but the reality is we've been really lucky, because once again, here's a storm that ramped up, more than once to become major status. Incredible what's happened.
Yeah, well, Lee to me, Hurricane Lee is a perfect sort of symbol of this year. We talk about this year being very unique, where we have an El Nino, which tends to create a hostile environment, tends to suppress hurricane activity in the Atlantic, but we also have these extremely warm sea surface temperatures. So we've got two sort of conflicting sort of factors that are kind of battling each other. And I felt like that battle played out with Lee. It became a hurricane, and the thing just exploded, went nuclear, got up to Cat 5 because of those sea surface temperatures. And then what happened? The shear got it, which is an El Nino thing. That El Nino shear just tore that thing up, and it got all deformed and kind of unraveled. And I feel like there we go. The clash of the Titans this year, the warm sea surface temperatures and the shear were just duking it out in Lee. I think Lee is like a symbol of this hurricane season.
One of the things that I watch, and you see how I post about it to my personal Facebook page, because I have a lot of friends and family who lean on me to say, hey, sort through all this hype and tell me what I need to worry about, okay? We saw it with Idalia, and part of it was because Idalia initially was supposed to be this sloppy tropical storm when it made landfall, and then, of course, the model started to pick up on, wait a minute, it's going to get this pocket of great conditions prior to landfall, and we expect it to potentially bomb out, and then it bombed out. But so much hyping going on social media. Never was that more clear than with Hurricane Lee, though, because anytime there's a possibility, maybe one model shows it hitting New York City, and suddenly you have all these people swarming into all these tropical blogs, and then posting these single model runs saying we're in trouble and we're going to get hit. And some of this, I figured this out the other day. Some of this is the business model for some of these tropical guys, because they're looking for contributions in order to make their money. And they would not be able to make money if they weren't hyping some. So they're trying to thread the needle between too much hype and just enough hype to keep people coming back to their website. But you see this a lot, don't you?
Yeah, and it's definitely gotten worse, in recent years. And I think this is social media is great. I love it. I've built a career on social media. This democratization of information, and we can all be our own newscasters, and we could all have an audience. But the downside is that there's just so much information out there, and I think that the average citizen often has trouble outside of their area of expertise. They have trouble knowing what is good information and what isn't. And with Lee, you just had a lot of garbage out there, just people who know nothing about tropical cyclones saying ridiculous things and getting unbelievable traction. And it was really concerning, and people really overreacted to Lee. One last thing I want to say about it is, it became a Category 5 in exactly the place and exactly the time of year that you'd expect that to happen. Deep in the tropical Atlantic in the first 10 days of September. There's actually nothing that unusual about it. It's just that people are just so that it's like they're acting like all these things are new occurrences when they're actually just normal.
And when Josh lends his voice to it, he tries to bring sanity back to the conversation. And oftentimes these guys don't want to hear sanity because hype is what makes it work for them. Hey, when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Josh Morgerman. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show. I have my friend Josh Morgerman, iCyclone, the top hurricane chaser in the world, who makes his base station Bay St. Louis, Mississippi during the hurricane season. He's actually building a house there, hurricane house. We'll get an update on that here in just a second. He actually has a very, very successful marketing firm in L.A. That's where he makes his real living. But he's made, hurricane chasing a living too. So he's got kind of a dual life these days. Speaking of chases, before we get too far away from Idalia, you found as you always magically are able to do, no matter how severe the terrain might be, you find your way into the eye of a storm. How was this eye? How was Idalia's eye?
Well, it was an interesting storm. So it had, the eye wall, the core of it was kind of falling apart as it came ashore. And so it felt like a lot of sort of decaying hurricanes I've been in, where the winds in the core of the hurricane were not steady. They were very uneven. So it would be like not so bad. And then you get these crazy destructive gusts just out of the blue. The storm had like no rhythm. It was basically pockets of violence separated by just kind of drizzly weather. It was a very weird storm. But unfortunately, the worst part of it, the west eye wall, which was where the real kind of convective action was happening, unfortunately, that passed over the largest town in that area. It's called Perry. It's actually the main population center between Tallahassee and Tampa. They got a direct hit. And there was I wouldn't call it catastrophic, but there was extensive damage around the town. Some roofs ripped off, a lot of signs down, a lot of trees down, just the streets, just littered with debris. They got banged up pretty good. It reminded me a little bit of like the Mississippi coast after Zeta. Not like a catastrophe, but banged up pretty good.
Yeah, a big mess. If you go back and look at the models, it's interesting. The models, some of the most reliable models had it hitting more to the west, and some of them had it hitting a little bit more to the east. They were kind of varied, really, but that northern trajectory, if it had hit in the Panacea region and headed toward Tallahassee, it would have been a mess. It would have been a mess for that area. But again, you can't say that when a storm hits Fort Myers and devastates Fort Myers Beach the way that it did, or that a storm hits something like Perry, and you say, and it gives them pretty significant challenges, that Florida dodged a bullet, because they literally did not dodge the bullet. But when you think about the main population centers that once again were spared, that could have been just absolute catastrophic impact to the insurance industry, et cetera. I would say Florida better count its lucky stars, at least as of this stage of the game, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And, here's the deal. A hurricane is large. Like when you look at it, it's a big system. It's hundreds of miles across. But the real bad part, the inner core, the thing we call the eye wall, that's actually a relatively small part of even a large hurricane. And that the sort of core of a major hurricane hits a major American city it's pretty rare. Like it doesn't actually happen that much that a major American city gets like a direct hit like that. Mobile got it in 1979 with Frederick. They got in that worst part. Corpus Christi got it in 1970 with Celia. They got a direct hit from a Category 4. Miami got it in 1926 and in 1950. Category 4 is directly hitting the city, but that was before Miami was what it is today. But Charleston got it in 1989 with Hugo, but it doesn't actually happen that much because it's a pretty small part of the hurricane. And when it does, we're talking billions and billions and billions of dollars in damage.
Okay, so let's shift gears. We're going to talk about the latest installments of Weather Spy that people can download. I mean, you can get it from just about any source that you can get streaming from. We're gonna see what's latest at Weather Nation. But before we do that, how's Hurricane House coming?
Hurricane House is coming. It's looking good. It has the James Hardy siding on it now, so it looks like now it's really kind of, the porch columns are done. So it's really starting to, like, I'm getting a feel for like how the house is going to look, and it's really exciting. And I take pictures of it every day, and I send them to my mother. It's like I feel like I'm showing baby pictures. It's like it's getting almost weird. But we're shooting for October 31st move-in date. That's what my builder Bo Ladner of Paramount Contracting, who's been awesome. He's been the mastermind behind this project, and he tells me October 31st is what we're shooting for, and I'm getting very excited about it. It's really coming together. I think it's gonna be a beautiful house. It's very, very. It celebrates the kind of architectural traditions of this region, because I wanted an old house, but I couldn't find just the right one. But that thing is gonna be a bunker.
Yeah, like I know it is. I mean, from the past conversations you and I have had, similar to what we did here at my house, you went for the gold standard, which has very specific, engineering requirements. So the bones are going to be good. What's cool about the pictures that you're posting now is that, as you pointed out, the architectural feel of it is beginning to be revealed, and it feels right for Bay St. Louis.
Okay, good. I'm glad you said that. I'm flattered when a Mississippian, a true native Mississippian, gives it the stamp of approval. I feel good. I will say that the house is 100% Mississippi project. The woman who designed it, the team that's building it, I mean, literally everyone on the team, everyone's like a native Mississippian. So it really is a Mississippi project, a Mississippi house.
It's come together really nicely. Okay, so one of the things about being with Idalia, not just posting with your iCyclone social media stuff, but it's also reporting for Weather Nation. How's that relationship going?
Really good. I mean, the thing I love about working with Weather Nation is they really let me be me. They give me the freedom. They don't treat me like a normal correspondent where they're like, okay, we want you to be here or there. They know I'm the hunting dog. I'm going after it. I'm just going to report from the road as I'm going. And that freedom, the creative freedom that they give me it means everything to me. And it's a cool, I've said this before, it's a very cool kind of entrepreneurial environment where they let you kind of, come up with new content ideas, and they let me run with them. And it's cool. It's a great sandbox creatively. You know
what I've noticed, Josh, in the weather blogs that I spend my time in, that there are a lot of rookies that are now out there trying to chase storms now. And here you are in the eye of the storm, but I wonder how many cars you see now moving around in the eye of a storm that weren't there 3 or 4 or 5 years ago.
It's funny you mention that, because on this particular chase of Idalia is the first time I really noticed it. It had a pretty small eye, and there are a lot of people chasing it. I think hurricane chasing has suddenly gotten very popular. I'll tell you why it is, because the U.S. since 2017 has had this unbelievable run of big hurricane impacts. So it's on people's minds, and and there's a lot of guys who just they could just drive 100 miles and boom, be in a hurricane. So it's kind of like popular right now, but I'd never noticed it until this chase. And it kind of, only about a third of my chasing is in the United States. I'm global. I like most of my chasing is actually abroad. It's outside of the United States. And I will say that when I go outside the United States, to Mexico, to Australia, to Taiwan, I enjoy that. Like a lot of times it's like the hurricane, I have it all to myself. It's like, it's kind of, and it allows you, it's not that I'm selfish, but when you go out and cover an event, I think the thing that makes it meaningful is to capture it and have a unique angle on it, a unique story to tell, to share footage that no one else has gotten. And if you're in some place where there's like 20 other guys, like, in that town, you're not gonna bring anything unique to the picture. So I think it's like the further you are from home, the more value you bring when you chase and when you document a storm.
Hey, listen, I'll tell you one thing I noticed. A couple of guys putting themselves in very, very, very risky scenarios, and I thought to myself, especially surge areas, that if the slosh models are correct, or maybe this goes 1 degree too much the way that they are, they could be in serious trouble. And there is a storm on the horizon that's going to fit that description, and these rookies are going to be in a position where they're just going to get washed away with the structure that they're sitting in, and they're dangerous. I mean, they're just gotten dangerous.
With this particular storm, I saw a lot of people freaked out because there were some chasers on Cedar Key. I would have been on Cedar Key too. The only reason I wasn't on Cedar Key was because the hurricane didn't go there. The hurricane missed it by like 60 miles. But what a lot of people don't know is like Cedar Key has hills. It's not like coastal Mississippi. So there actually are places to like there are places to retreat to. There are hills on Cedar Key. So it wasn't as suicidal or as daredevil-y, I think, as a lot of people thought from home. So that's one thing I'll say about that.
There was one guy that I followed that was actually in a house on the beach. That's not a good place to be. I'm just telling you.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way I always have. I have mixed feelings about this because, listen, I feel like any storm chaser, anyone who's doing this, especially really hardcore. We're all kind of living a risky lifestyle, and I know where my line is, and I can't tell anyone else where their lines should be. So
well.
I refrain from commenting on anyone else's chasing. That's always been my policy.
I think about Haiyan in the Philippines and Lord knows what else, which people can actually watch on Weather Spy. We're out of time for the day, but go to Weather Spy and see Josh's program. Tell them real quick the details.
So my show, Mission Hurricane, it's a series every Sunday night. Actually, I think the last of 13 episodes, is this coming Sunday night, 6 p.m. Central Time on Weather Spy, which you can get on many, many streaming platforms.
Weather Spy and Mission Hurricane. You'll be glad you did. It's extraordinarily well produced. Hey, Josh, it's been a pleasure to catch up with you, my friend.
Thanks, Ricky. It's always awesome to come on the Ricky Mathews Show.
You bet. Hey, we'll see you when we come back on the other side. We'll see you after this.